got to ask you about the Lions.
It's very, very easy to go Finn Russell. I still think he will go Finn Russell. But did Finn have his best Six Nations? No. Absolute chance. Owen Farrell coming back playing 10. No.
Oh, that's exciting.
God, your dad picks you at captain. You're not even playing in England.
So, Mike, I was thinking about your moment and the thing that most defines you, which I suppose everyone can guess or imagine for themselves. We know what the answer to that's going to be, and you're going to talk about it a bit. I was thinking about where I was. You know, when you think about where were you when something great happened, and it's always around or in and around sport, these sorts of moments. So think to myself, where was I when England won the World Cup? I was en route to the Maldives, and I had 2 different flights to catch to get there. And I got off one flight and it still wasn't job done. And I got off the next flight and it still wasn't job done. It's the most incredible feeling from where I was about the anticipation of what might be about to happen. And then it did. And that magic moment, you were there. I mean, you were in the middle of all of that, living it, you know, the thing that you'd strive so much for. You guys actually achieved it, which, you know, few sports people can actually lay testament to. So just tell us about it. Just tell us about, you know, why that moment was so clearly defining.
Well, yeah, I think it has so many elements to a great sporting moment. You know, being a draw at full time, having to go to extra time. Jonny, you know, in Jonny's world, not having the best drop kicking day of his life. I think he missed 2 or 3 off his left peg. So, you know, and there were moments within that, you know, Dawson, Kieran talking about what happens if you've got a drop goal to win a World Cup, and Dawson said, "Well, you dummy it, right?" And obviously, then that appeared on the pitch. He dummies it, makes another 20 yards. Jono carries it up, and then Dawson gets back to his feet, and Jonny hits it with his right foot, just to show off a little bit. But but the build up to that, that's just the manifestation of 4 years of work. You know, it's also an extension of the heartache of '99, England's worst ever exit in a World Cup to that point, which I brushed across very briefly because I got called up into that squad the week of that South Africa game where we lost, and you know, and then the changing of the guard in some ways, the retirement that always happens after a World Cup, and then the cycling of the next generation of players, which then turned out to be great England players: Ben Cohen, Jason Robinson, Ian Bolshaw, Steve Thompson. You know, Trevor Woodman would have come in. You know, Vix would have been around, but wouldn't have always been playing. Ben Kay came in, but yet still having the gnarled, experienced old heads of Jono, Back, Hill, Delalio, you know, Bracken, Dawson. Will Greenwood came in '97, so he was probably 2 years ahead. But and it was just a shift in mentality, along with a very much awareness of don't upset the old fellas, because they, you know, Jono could quite easily kill you. It's like Chewbacca, could easily rip your arms off. So, you know, and that sort of education piece tied in with the coaches at the right time, Clive at the right time in terms of what he was doing, and you know, Dave Redding, head of our S&C, and you know, we had Matt Lovell, Adam Carey on our nutrition side. We were just doing stuff, Cheryl Calder, our eye trainer, and just things that weren't happening in our sport at that time. And we were fishing in other people's pools that had been professional a lot longer, and you add all that together. Yeah, there were some comedic stories down the line in terms of getting things that were completely irrelevant, but you have to, if you're going to try things, you have to walk some of those comedy lines at the same time. And you know, I think it all sort of came out in that moment, in that one drop goal. I think Robertson, BBC reporter, described it very well as it went over when Jonny managed to do it. And it was all that sort of 4 years of emotion that came into one spot.
And before we came on air with the pod, we talked about the fact that, God, for you, that was early on in your career. You know, you were one of the young bucks. Like, what, you know, to achieve that really early on, What does that do to a person? What does that do to a player?
Well, I think it's very individual. It's very individual about where your mentality is. I actively can remember my next thing was we have to defend it in 4 years' time. So it's right. We've done that, but now we've got to go back to back because at that point no one had done a back to back. So that was the next job. And I think that was one of the good things about that team is everything was related to your next job. So we had setbacks along the way. So you've got to learn hard lessons along the way. We lost Grand Slam in 2002. We lost a Grand Slam in 2001. We didn't lose a Grand Slam in 2002, but technically it was. We lost to France early on, and they went on and won it, I think. And then we finally managed to get that monkey off our back in 2003 and go pretty much unbeaten. We lost a warm-up game to France in Marseille, but outside of that, that was the only game we lost in 27 games or something like that. So, yeah, I think it's just you look at team sport, and I do think rugby is very unique in terms of it is a out-and-out team sport. You are reliant. As well as you might have a great player, he is always completely reliant on the forwards either giving him the ball or the backs putting up the forwards in the right area of the field and the management of the game. So and if you don't care about the guy to your left or to your right, you won't go that extra yard. And if you don't go the extra yard, you'll miss a tackle or you'll fall off it because you're not committed enough, or you won't slow the ball down. You'll make a mistake and it'll cost you. And that team, from everything, was just so well connected, personally, interpersonally, and from the coaching staff, and having the right management between coaches and players in terms of them respecting us to listen to us enough, us respecting them to allow them to try stuff, and we'll go at it wholeheartedly, and then we'll review it. And so it was an environment I have not been in since, which is hence why I haven't won anything else since. So, and to do it consistently, to do it for over 4 years is I can only describe it as us coming in at that. So I got capped in. I got called up for the '99 World Cup spot on my 21st birthday. I might have not been being that professional when Clive rang me. I think I was playing drinking. I was playing drinking golf. I think when he rang me on my 21st birthday, thinking I wasn't going to the World Cup. So, but obviously, as soon as he made that call, I finished the round, obviously, and then went and got in a car and went to Twickenham. But from that age group, I then got capped. So I went up, experienced what it was to be in a World Cup for that short period of time, and then I got capped at the next Six Nations. And to go through that, then when you go on a winning run, I mean, no England player, So for myself, Bolsh, Benny Cohen, who got capped on that same day, to go on a run where over the next 4 years you only lose 4 games for an England rugby player, and you never lose to New Zealand or Australia, and then you only lose to South Africa once, which was in the summer of 2000, which also, that second test, I think, is our most important way, because to go to South Africa, win that, we only just lost the first game, and then we knew we had to win the second game, and we went out and we did a job, and I think that changed the whole belief system. You need something that makes you believe in what you're doing, and to go there, and it was at the time when no one went away to the Southern Hemisphere and really won, and we went and got that win, and that changed our whole mentality. And then they came over in the autumn, where it used to be a battle, but generally England came off the wrong end of it, and to go clean sweep them from then, and then they didn't touch us then for the next sort of 2.5, 3 years. You have an inner confidence that you believe you can get back. It's sort of what the South African team now has got, is whatever their situation they're in, they believe they can get it back. And a lot of the time they do.
And how do you forge that? How do you create that within a unit? Like what journey do you go on as a team together to make that a reality?
Well, you have to learn from bad experiences. Now, I think, and that's where I go back to the experience that the Jonos, Leonards, Dorian Wests, Back, Hill, Delalio, they've suffered horrible defeats or heartbreaking defeats on games, and but then you bring in a load of young players who want to not play the game differently, but think slightly differently. They're not old school in terms of how they want to play rugby,
and don't have those past experiences.
And don't have those. I was coming in from we won we were in my England experience, even at under 18s, was a good one because we never lost. We looked. You look at that team. There's a reason why we never lost. We had the likes of Dave Flatman, Andrew Sheridan, Lee Mears, Steve Borthwick, Jonny Wilkinson, myself, Ian Bolshaw, Simon Daniele, James Grindle, Alex Sanderson. So we had what would be the next generation of England players for a long time to come in that team, and I think then having that core knowledge of each other going forward probably put us in a better place, because it was it's like you look at this French team now. They won 2 back-to-back under-20 World Cups with fundamentally a lot of the players that are now in that team. So they've come through. They've already done their journey together. They're so close as a team, close as a teammates. Plus, they've got a massive Toulouse contingent, so they're playing week in, week out together. And rugby still is about connection. I think it's about partnerships and understanding each other. Making were Will Greenwood and I the best players that's played in the centre? Not in Unelli. If you take us as an individual, there are always better players than both of us, but we managed to figure out how to get the best out of each other and each other's weaknesses, and fill the role of I'll cover his weaknesses, he covers mine. I know when he needs to get in the game. I know when he doesn't want to run into a brick wall, so I'll do it for him. And then you sort of get that balance, and then you extend that out. It's how you work with Wilco. You know what Wilco wants, and and then it just becomes sort of ingrained in you that you can understand. It's quite hard to describe. You have a snapshot of a situation, and you know exactly the answer. But the best thing is the 3 people around you also know that answer. So you then do the same thing at the same time.
You've repeatedly been on that journey with each other.
Yeah. And that's some of the way we train as well, scenario training and everything else. But it's never the same as being on the field, seeing the snapshot in that blink of an eye, and then being able to react immediately to it. But that comes from that steadiness in selection. I think. If you look at the world now, if someone has one great game at a club, they say they should play for England. Whereas, Clive trusted people. Some would say he trusted them beyond what he should have done. So sometimes it didn't matter what they were doing at their club. He knew they wouldn't let him down for England. Now, there is something in that, in the fact, if players know if they're not playing to their best of their ability. Yeah, if someone sticks by them, it gives you a massive lift and a massive confidence. Now, so, if you flip that on the other side, people will say you never want anyone comfortable in their position, but there is also a feeling of owing a coach or having to give back if you feel you're in that situation where your head could be on the chopping block, but yet he supports you, and you'll go above and beyond even the norm to try and repay him.
Winning that World Cup, does it change anything about your world? I mean, other than the moment itself, which is seismic and huge for English rugby, what does it change in your world, in your life? I mean, actually, you did meet your wife, so that was a big change.
Yeah, I think, it's that old sliding doors moment of getting dropped for the semi-finals, which I think was the first time I got dropped. Clive had dropped me, and then happening to go out and meet Zara in a bar that night. Not that I was pretty grumpy, so I didn't really speak to her, to be fair. And she was on a long lunch with some of the girls that are now very good friends of mine as well. But it just happened to be with Austin and Martin Corrie had been dropped as well, and they'd met her whenever they'd met her at a racing pub basically a few times. So they were talking to her, and I wasn't really talking to anyone because I was a bit grumpy. But the sliding doors moment. If he had picked me for that semi-final, I probably wouldn't have gone out for a beer, and history might be different. But rugby's not a great sport at making superstars or making it's not like football where it pushes the individual forward. I mean, Wilco did it on his own because of just how pivotal and how a lot of the big moments that you see, not only with his kicking but the hits that he did, and some of the tries he actually scored, the little chip over against New Zealand at Twickenham. Then he's doing obviously big in Adidas, so then he does an advert with Beckham, and then suddenly you're shifting like that. But that also pushed him into shying away from that because he didn't like it. He didn't like everyone recognise him. Whereas he should have really kicked rugby on and become a global superstar. But that wasn't for. He still is a global superstar, but he could have. The world was his oyster, really. As James Haskell keeps saying, if I was Jonny Wilkinson, oh my God, it would have been. He would have been everywhere. He wouldn't even talk to any of his teammates. He would just be, so it's probably thank the Lord that James Haskell wasn't him. But I think that's the moment we sort of missed. And even you can say with like Dan Carter and even Jonah. Jonah didn't go after lauding being. And I think that's something about rugby. And
I was going to say, is that just the character of a rugby player, not to want to get swallowed up in that other stuff?
Yeah, and I think there is
James being the exception.
Yeah, James is definitely the exception. There's a few exceptions out there. I think Cipriani would have taken it as well, and but that's not in a bad way. I think I think we actually now, looking at the sport, we need people like that because people are attracted to what they can see as stardom or whatever, and then they become interested in it. And at the moment, they call it tall poppy syndrome or whatever you want to call it in rugby, where you're never bigger than the team, and the team always comes first. Whereas, in America, it's never about that. People follow the stars, and then they'll support the team off the back of the fact that the star plays for it. And I think that is something that is really missing. You look at the most famous rugby player in the world right now is Ilona Maher, and she's a American sevens player who completely has lit it up because I think one thing that women's rugby is going to do is it gives any shape, any size, any of women, colour, creed, whatever, a place to go and play a physical and attritional sport. And that's very, very rare that's something that's there for women outside of boxing or UFC. And it's got all those connectivity bits to bring people together that women love, being part of something as a team. And I think you're going to see a massive growth in that women's market, and that's why Ilona's done so well. Is she is a big, powerful lady who not only likes to look pretty, get dressed up, go to premieres, go out for nice dinners, but she also likes running over the top of people and hurting people. So, she's sort of an inspiration for those people.
Has she got the power to change the men's game in that way, so that actually you approach it slightly differently and you do allow that stardom?
Yeah, I think they definitely do. There's caveats to that because I know that it's how you PR. She's just doing such a good job in terms of how she markets being herself. I think
it's authentic.
And is it because also it's American, so people have bought into it a lot better. Bristol bought into it, so in terms of what it did to their socials, how they streamed with her, they obviously worked with her and her agent in terms of what's going to work for them, and it takes thought of and ultimately commitment, and that's something that rugby also passes by. Is they don't think always, they're not thinking down that road. That's obviously a budgetary thing as well, money, but you have to spend money to make money is the old adage, isn't it? And I think that social media is becoming such a role. I was reading something on fandom the other day, and how fandom works, and a lot of the time it's not about going and watching someone, it's just their perception of being famous
Yeah.
or their perception of them being the best. So then people will go and follow them and find out, but they might not actually go and watch them. They'll prefer to just see what they're doing on socials, which is a whole new world, rather than it actually being what you do on your perceived field or your sporting arena. And especially for the women's game, that is way more. It's not gonna, even though like women's rugby is growing massively, I think I don't want to over-egg the number, but I think 60% of it is still males going and watching. So you're getting support from that side as well as the female market, but yet how well they're doing, and especially if you look at the Red Roses, is elevating the participation of young women playing rugby now, because I see that down at my local club at Minchinhampton or wherever we go. The women's teams there's more and more people wanting to get involved. But again, I think that's just because it's a sport for all shapes, all sizes, everyone. And but also, so I think Courtney Laws came up with a great thing about rugby. Rugby is for everyone. No, what do you say? Rugby's for all, but not for everyone, because you have to have a certain mentality to want to play it. Because ultimately it can be quite a scary sport at the same time, but anyone can go and have a go. And I think that's where rugby's got to get better, is also going, well, okay, if we can't get everyone to play contact, let's make sure we have an unbelievable touch or flag or whatever it might be, where you're developing athletic ability in kids from whatever, but they don't have to do that physicality right then and there. They might come back to it, but you've got to upskill them and let them know the game before you turn them off by the contact side of it, or you've just got to keep them going and then pull them back in if they want to.
And you've got your girls playing it, right? They're playing it.
Yeah, so Mia played for a fair bit, and then Lena's still going at the moment. She actually quite enjoys it. I think Mia's sort of built for it, but at the moment she's going through the 11-year-old / 14-year-old stage where you can't really tell
to
her.
Look forward to. I can't bear it.
And then Lucas is just turned 4, and he goes down and joins the under-6, so he's way young, but he is definitely made for rugby at the moment.
And can you see what what it gave you? Can you see what it can give them?
Yeah, 100%. I think Mia, even though she might not play at the moment, if she goes down there, she goes and works behind the bar and like sells the coffees and sells the crisps and the bar. So that's what's great about a rugby club. A rugby club like Minchinhampton, who I haven't played for 18 months, because everyone keeps saying I keep play for them, and then I go down to the rugby club and they're like, oh yeah, someone said you still playing for us. I haven't seen you in a year and a half. And I'm like, okay, I just need to correct that. So I haven't played for a year and a half, but but I think you look at that club, they have a new clubhouse. It was built by most of the members. So the plumber did the plumbing, the electrician, Matt, who is an architect, he designed the clubhouse, and that's what grassroots rugby is, and that's what grassroots sport is. I imagine it's not that much different if you go to a football club or whatever. There are the volunteers and the people who drive everything on, but with rugby's physical side to it, it's a home for people who don't necessarily know their space in sport. They need something, and
that's interesting.
Well, there's a stat with the Argentinian rugby, right? They've been going into prisons over the last I'm not sure, about 18 months, and the reoffending rate on a prisoner is about 85%. So they've then pulled this program together of the ones, and the people who've come in and joined and played rugby, the reoffending rate was 5%. And we went and did Grand Slammers, where we went into Hemel Hempstead prison.
Yeah, I remember you doing that,
and I can completely see it. Yeah, we didn't get long enough. It was a TV show, and we went in and we pulled guys who never played rugby before, never knew physical contact outside of what comes with their fists, majority of it. And to see how much they changed over the 3 months that we were in there, we've tried to sort of say, look, we need to know where everyone is going, but there's a lot of people on a long prison sentence. I think 16 years was one of the longest that was still had left who was playing. But to see how much they enjoyed coming together as a unit of blokes and actually having a common goal that they were trying to aim for, and knowing that they had to work as a team, it is unique. And I think anyone who would have been on that program with us, everyone saw what a difference it made to those guys' lives. Now, what we need to do is make sure they keep up. I know a lot of them have joined the actual rugby team, but it's very easy to slip back if it's not something that's constant. And I think there's definitely a program in there that could, it's always hard, isn't it, about what is rehabilitation? What chances do they deserve? I think for that show we put in over 1,000. We have 1,000 people or something like that, applicants who were happy to come in, and I think the Ministry of Justice allowed like 20 or 25, and it's like, well, so yes, I understand there's people who've probably done some bad things in there, but how can you ever rehabilitate them if you don't give them a chance to? You know what I mean? And it made me think a little bit differently about that. And obviously Ben Cohen spoke about that in the fact of, what happened to his dad and those guys who ended up in prison.
But also that goes back to what you were saying right at the beginning about that 2003 World Cup win, where you were asked to do things that were progressive and different. Sometimes you got laughed at for it, but you had to give it a go and try it, because who knows, it might just work.
Yeah.
So it's the same sort of mindset, isn't it? It's the same sort of thinking.
Completely. So we're getting slightly off topic of rugby, but I think that is the mentality of a rugby player. People need to sort of understand that it does take you. It's not an easy sport to play. You're basically getting your head kicked in every Saturday, and you've got to enjoy it. And it's no different to a fighter going in the ring. But it hurts. Your body hurts. It takes a toll on you, but most of the time you love it. It's like, people still ask me, what would you still play? I said, look, I'd love to play at the moment, but I just enjoy the pain on a Sunday. It makes me feel like I've done something, and I feel good about myself. But that's sort of the hook that you get into, and the more that you enjoy that, I think the more you get out of your career.
So I get that's that side of it. I can completely see that is something that you could get really, really, hooked into, being part of that. On the other side of that, there are, and it continues to be spoken about, the dangers of that. How much is that front and center of your thinking when you're playing versus when you stop playing? Like, actually sort of, the care and attention to make sure you're looked after and you're protected, and you've put everything in place to make sure the coaches have around you to make sure that that damage that you may be doing is limited.
Yeah, look, I think without getting too dark about the sport, it's something that I would say, because I always try and sit on the positive side of it. It's something that people are trying to do, but the problem with our sport at the moment is no one makes money. So then, if no one's making money, one of the hardest things to then fund is the aftercare, or where people fall out of, where people aren't front and center and you're seeing them every day. You look at that 03 group, we're now trying to set up sort of a Champions 03 company, which helps those guys with extra revenue if they need it, which some do. Also looks after them in terms of health, if they've got issues, because when you finish sport, one of the first things that goes is insurance, because depending on what injuries you've had through your career, they then get excluded. But obviously, naturally, those things are going to be the ones that you probably need an operation on down the line to sort out, or whether it be knees, shoulders, whatever, discs, back. But then it becomes very hard to get that insurance. So we're trying to help with that. And then also that transition period of going from a sport where you're in the top 2% of your work and your job, and then suddenly one day you retire, and unfortunately at the moment, rugby isn't one of those sports where you're going to walk away into the sunset and have the possibility of enjoying your life. Not that that even matters. You hear stories about footballers who can't find a purpose once they retire, and money will either get you there quicker or anything else. And so we're trying just to deal with how you transition sort of out of that. I think the hard thing for sports people at the same time is flipping your mindset whilst you're trying to be the best in your sport of what comes next, because no one ever thinks about injury. No, you always think you're invincible, or you never think the journey is going to come to an end. I think some players are very good at making that transition, and I know a few that were at Gloucester who now IFAs, or they've gone into insurance, or they've ironically gone into insurance. But then there's people, and I would have fallen into this bracket, who in my head, my sole role was Saturday. So everything I did was to make sure I was ready for Saturday. Now, I would say that helped me in my career, because I managed to achieve what I achieved, and that was mainly through that sort of mentality. But then, once I retired, I think Zara would probably, I say it was about 6 months where I didn't really have a clue what I was doing, or what I was going to do, or where I was going to go. Or Zara says it's probably a year, but so I'll bow down to her on that one, because she probably had to live with me. So, and it does take time, and that's even with me coming from my perspective of
what were you like? What were you like during that time? Because this is a common thread for all of us who live with athletes. It is a common theme. Like, this is really difficult. You have been immensely successful and achieved what so few people do, and then suddenly you got to find part two.
Yeah,
and that's fraught with all sorts of blimmin' head messing complications, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's loads of extra things in. There's not only sort of your side of it. Like, the good thing is I think generally about rugby players is they're not lazy, so they want to work, and they'll do anything. But so for my sort of 6 months, I was just saying yes to everything, because also you want to try and figure out something that ticks a box that you like.
What sticks?
Yeah. So whether it's charity stuff, whether it's someone goes, "Oh, will you come and do a speech here?" or "Will you come and look and do this?" or "Will you do that?" And obviously I jumped into a couple of reality TV shows just because one was on whilst the autumn internationals are on, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know how I'm going to deal with that first year out. Do I really want to watch them, or do I do it?" So went and spent some time with Bear Grylls, and then you sort of then over time you start understanding what you don't like doing, or why am I filling my time with that, or from sort of my charity side of it with my dad and everything, I was like, well, why am I doing stuff for charities that I've got no real affiliation with? They haven't touched me. Every charity is obviously a great charity, but
yeah,
I feel that you give better when you've felt it or you've touched it, and so there was then that piece of figuring out where that was going to go with, like, Matt Hampson Foundation, obviously from what he went through playing the game, my dad, and then it's sort of like, well, what are we going to do? And fortunately there is always those after dinner speaking markets that can fill time, but you always want a career. I don't want that to be a career, because people can get obsessed with telling the same story over and over again, but I get quite
it wears thin after a while.
Well, I get quite bored with it, and so fortunately then the podcast sort of came along, and then that's something we could really throw into.
Whose idea was it to put the three of you together in the first instance? And I know people sub in and sub out now, but you three are sort of the iconic three. I mean, where did that come from?
Yeah, that was Alex. I think the people who first approached Alex with it, their plan of a three was very different, and Alex was like, it's not going to fit. You need someone who's going to flick everyone's switches, and I think that's one thing that Alex is brilliant at, is understanding that, and so he picked me and Hask, and we went and give it a whirl, and we used to record on a Monday night, and we'd make sure we'd have 3 or 4 Guinnesses whilst we're doing it, and it was like we were just sat in the pub having a catch up, and I think that's sort of why it went off, and then that's led to sort of the other things that we do, and opportunities that sort of come through your door, But going back to what it's like, but people also forget is their partners within this retirement process. As you just mentioned, we all know what it's like living with a rugby player or a sportsman who's leaving, is because people never think about the wives, right? So if you look at sort of Zara, we've been together since 2004, living together. And because sport is such an institutionalizing sort of thing where routine becomes the norm, she would be able to tell my schedule will be up for 6 months basically on the fridge door, so she'd know everywhere I'm going to be, what I'm doing, where I'm going to be. But then you take that away from them, so then you might go, I have to go to London for 3 days. She's like, oh, okay, at one time will be okay, but then it's like, actually now I need to fly here or I need to go there, and suddenly nothing's routine, nothing's a change. You might have kids, so suddenly everything that you've known for 17 years, plus you take away that girls like being with the other wives and girlfriends or members of the families of who also play in their teams or whatever, especially rugby.
You're like a family, you share it.
So then you suddenly take those connections away as well. So you've taken 35 of not that you take them away because they're still on the phone or whatever, but you're not seeing them in the regular thing. You're not catching up at least once a week or twice a week if you go out with them during the week or whatever. So then suddenly you feel your wife or your partner feels sort of isolated, but you're as a sportsman, you are quite selfish. Having two sportsmen in our house, we've made it work because we sort of understand each other quite well. But you're quite selfish because you're going, well, I need to go and earn some money. I need to go do this. I need to do that. So you sometimes forget that side of it, and then that creates problems, and then suddenly everything explodes. Well, so that's where it can also be tough because you're not used to managing that because you haven't ever had to because it's always been the norm.
So you go, so obviously because I feel this very keenly, as you can well imagine, but is there a moment where it changed? Was there a moment where, obviously that fridge magnet with your dates on it of where you needed to be more, and then that's gone? When did you get to a place where you're like, okay, we can live with this? Like, this isn't going to be awful. This is going to be fine. We're going to figure it out.
Look, I think I would say from mine and Zed's point of view, that we didn't really have it to that extreme. I think it's been more watching other people, either relationships come to an end or of close friends that I didn't think would come to an end. But that's what sort of made me think about how little, with Zara's calendar as it is, it's a bit all over the place anyway.
Yeah.
So we've always had a bit of that managing to do. It's definitely been worse now, and I still don't think I've got it right yet, and I've been retired 10 years. So, as she says, I'm too happy to say yes to things. That is a work on for me, which I know is the truth. But it was watching close friends suffer that made me really think about it, and sort of I understand it, and it's something that is overlooked in terms of dealing with it. I think that side of it, of how it can affect home. It's the same as military guys. Military guys are used to, right, I'm going on tour for 6 months, or I'm going, and then you take them away and they're suddenly living in a house with someone they're only supposed to spend 6 months a year with, and then everything sort of unravels because they're not used to being around each other that much time.
Yeah.
And it's just something that gets overlooked and is a shame, really.
No, I totally hear that. I'm going back to the Good, the Bad, the Rugby. I was watching this because in the lead up to us chatting today, I was watching your episode that you did at Windsor Castle.
Oh, right.
And I've never seen you look as nervous as when you were sat on that. That was the first moment where you were sat on the sofa, because I never see you nervous. And there was this moment where you were sat on the sofa and there was your mother-in-law in front of you and the prince and the princess on the sofa opposite. And then obviously Alex and James. I don't know whether you're more worried about what James was going to say.
No, 100%. I'm scared about what he's going to steal, and I'm scared about what he's going to say. So yeah, but
what was that like? Was it just I mean, they're all very, like you say, humble people, and it's a lovely family. I mean, is it it puts you in a unique position being able to do something like that, but there comes a real responsibility with that as well, doesn't there?
Yeah, look, I think it was born out the idea again for me and Alex. Um, it's just going through rugby was in a real sort of trough before going into um, that World Cup. Again, it was all that sort of negativity, and being fortunate enough to talk to the princess um, as much as I do, Princess Royal, that is, and her love of rugby, but not her love of rugby because of just the rugby, but because of the characters. Like, why was she such good mates with Rob Wainwright? Why is she such good? What was she with the late great Doddy? The David Souls, all these guys that she loved spending time with, and to be that person for 38 years, I think
Yeah,
she's
yeah,
something like that, that she's been patron of Scottish rugby. I was like, you need people to tell you that story, why she enjoys it so much.
yeah. And you
So,
can see that it comes across so clearly.
and then with the Prince and Princess of Wales, it was, I know how much they love sport and how much sport plays a role in their life. I also know how competitive they are, and I was like, look, it will be brilliant, and they happen to fall into being the patrons of the home unions, so it's going to work from all the angles that we want it to work from. It was just whether we could get it through, and I think the Prince and Princess of Wales were nervous because I wouldn't say that their knowledge of rugby is their sweet spot. He's a massive Aston Villa fan, and George is a Villa fan, and whereas she is just to go out there and do her. She loves hiking, she loves walking, she loves running, she loves playing any sport, tennis, whatever it might be. And speaking to, I spoke to a few of the current England boys because she's obviously been and done some training sessions with them and bits and pieces, and they were all impressed by how that
Yeah.
sort of sporty she was. And being lifted in a line out is not easy. Like, generally the normal thing is, even in a normal rugby player, if they lift you, you kick one of them in the bollocks, basically. It's generally because you're just so unused to being lifted from that. But she didn't do any of that, so she was good core, quite solid skills, and they were all quite impressed. So I was like, no, come on, she must have done something that we can have a little joke about. And they were like, no, she was pretty good. So I think we just wanted it to be about the love of sport and their passion for sport and their
Yeah.
belief in how much sport can, change people's lives or give them an outlet that is much needed. A lot, they spend a lot of time on mental health and everything else, and so we just approached with the idea. I thought we'd get shut down pretty quickly, and then they let us in, and then panic ensued about, oh my god, I'm taking Haas to Windsor Castle. I mean, Alex just fitted in seamlessly, but
Yes, of course he would. Of course he would.
but yeah, James was a worry.
But like you say, again, the dynamic of the three of you works so well, doesn't it? And you need a bit of spice. You need somebody that's unpredictable, that can throw a curveball quite literally into the situation and create talking points. Because otherwise, it gets a bit boring.
Yeah, you don't want everyone sharing the same opinion. And Haskell, Haskell always look at it from a different point. He flip flaps a bit around it, but he sometimes does that on purpose to just give another opinion of it. And I think that's what stimulates people to interact with us or actually get involved, is because our sport is mainly objective. It's people have their own opinions all the time because there's so many laws and there's so many possible outcomes to certain things, and a lot of the time in the modern world it comes out negative, but the players are still unbelievable players. All the people who comment on them are never going to be better than them, but yet they seem to think that they know more than them.
I've got to ask you about the Lions just before I let you go, and about Andy Farrell's headache, good or bad, with squad selection. What do you think are the biggest things that he's going to be mulling over at the moment?
I think his fly half is, it's very, very easy to go Finn Russell. I still think he will go Finn Russell, but did Finn have his best Six Nations? No. But then was that because Scotland didn't have their best Six Nations? Probably. Whereas, your likes of your Finn Smith just looked very assured. Obviously, you've still got Marcus who can do a job. I think that's not nailed on, that spot. I think he ultimately will go with Finn Russell, and no one's going to argue about it. But I think that's the headache for him. I think you've got a little one at fullback. Furbank wasn't there. I think Blair Kinghorn had a fantastic one. You've got Hugo Keenan as well. I think there's 5 or 6. Your back row, there are so many good back rowers. So that's going to come down to combinations. I generally think those back rowers are going to be playing for their spots throughout the tour, which I think is great for the team. Talk about team morale, and with the Lions, they have to have a belief that every time you take the field, you can make a test spot. We've seen it before. Clive maybe got it wrong in 2005 because he basically split the two teams. There's a midweek team and a test team, and it's like, well, how to disenfranchise or disinterest a group is by saying you are basically the midweek team. You've got no chance of getting into the test team. Those greatest tours have been where someone's played unbelievable on a Wednesday or keeps just rocking up and turning up, and then he's in a test team. Yes, he's knackered. He's probably only had 3 days, but that is the uniqueness of the Lions. So I think there's I think it's exciting because there's quite a lot where people's performances on the tour are definitely going to dictate whether they get in that team or not. There's a few ironed-on ones, but I think that the openness around selection is good. I think it's going to make for a great tour. Yeah,
it's
sure.
really exciting. And what about the captain? Who's going to be the Lions captain is, that is one of those talismanic gigs, isn't it, in rugby? Who's going to end up with that gig?
Yeah, so all I can say, I don't know. I think, people were talking about Doris, Caelan Doris, but again, I'm not sure he gets in the back row at the moment.
Wow.
I think, again, Ireland's up and down performances over the last 12 months, autumn and Six Nations, I think there are back rowers firing. Marrow, and I would, you can go back and search this up. Me and Haas both said we don't think he's a captain, but how much he's changed.
Interesting. Yeah.
How much he's changed since he's had that England captaincy role. And there's just little bits that jump out with the way he interacted with the referee throughout the whole Six Nations. The way, Chandler Cunningham South came on out of position, having to go into the second row early when Chesham had to go off. And he just pulled him aside. He didn't rush, kept the referee waiting, but just talked him through either what line-out calls were, what he needs, and, just had that composure, which I've not really associated with him before. We know how good a player he is. So
do you think getting that England nod has given him that opportunity to sort of prove that he is up to that, he is capable of that, and he's showing it?
I think so, and I think it looks like he's probably done some work off pitch as well. I think he's always been a energy leader and a standard leader. You've seen that, when he gets turnovers, the energy, but all the Sarries boys are good at that. Ben Earl's good at that as well. He's definitely not my cup of tea. And so, for a long period, it was like, oh my God, it's quite embarrassing. Woo! When they get a turnover and everything else. But, I get why they do it. You look at the NFL, it's something that they do. If they make a great play, everyone, it's about lifting the energy of other people around them. And I think it's something we've really got to embrace a bit more because, that's the entertainment business that we're ultimately in. Yes, it's a sport, but it's there to entertain as well. So I think he has massively shifted in. I think he's done some work on it. Whether he's done spent a bit of time with someone about demeanor, what is a leader, whatever. It just looked different. Even to when he was playing in the autumn and he wasn't captain, it looks different. And so I think he really has put his hand up, helped with England having its best Six Nations in a long time. So yeah, I think it's hard to look past Marrow currently. But then they could still. Faz, being an Irish coach, knows Caelan Doris very well. It could be an easy choice for him that he goes down that road. But I think you you sort of, I think you would be sort of picking between those two. Upside chance, Owen Farrell coming back playing 10.
Oh, that's exciting.
God,
isn't
your dad picks you at captain. You're not even playing in England. No. But
yeah, but that'll be a stunning comeback, right? That's a great story.
Yeah, I think if Owen was ripping up trees in France, but Racing have been very hit and miss, I think, which is unfortunate because he was. I did think he'd sneak on, to be fair, this year, but I don't think they've played well enough to give him that opportunity. But there's a couple of other French guys. Will he take, like the Jack Willis? We talk about back rows. Jack Willis has been playing out of his skin for Toulouse, but he's going to get punished. Not only is he punished that he can't play for England, but he might get punished that he can't play for the Lions because he'll still be playing for Toulouse when they go and play their first game. So there you go.
Well, we'll watch this space. It's like an imminent squad announcement, so we'll watch this space. So what else is happening in the state of rugby? Do you think moving forward there's sort of opportunities abounding for new and exciting ventures?
Look, I think if you look at what's happening in the sporting market around the world at the moment, Baller League, Striker, in boxing, the whispers of an NBA sort of breakaway global franchise, and there's been that global franchise mentioned in rugby as well. I think the game is there to be. I think there's an opportunity in the game at the moment. I think it's a fantastic game that has a. People say it's not a global game, and the reason why they say it's not a global game is because there aren't enough really sports, countries that will challenge for it. I think that is why, if you look at football, there are so many countries that could beat any country on any given day. But I think where the rugby fan base is it makes it a global game. We just don't deliver it on a global platform. So I do think there is something there. The World Rugby are trying to do that now with the Nations series that they're bringing in, the new summer tours, and then the new autumn sort of series finale, and having a final with that every 2 years. We've still got a problem with global calendar alignment. I think there needs to be a shift. Like Six Nations, you would say, is the most precious jewel in the international crown outside the World Cup. So it's very hard to move that. But then the Rugby Championship is in a random time on its own. So whether that can shift and align that would allow club rugby to really align and for a TV or a broadcaster to tell a good story throughout the year. It becomes very easy to follow, whereas at the moment it's a bit staccato. It's like you're jumping around all over the place. But I think there's a huge audience, looking at figures, there's anywhere between, depending on what figures you read, between 400 to a billion rugby fans, 400 million to a billion rugby fans. I mean, I think the comfortable number is about 500 million rugby fans globally that tune into the Rugby World Cup, but yet there aren't really not a lot of those won't watch club rugby. They just watch those international sports. So I think there is something for an elite version of the game that could do that. If this global,
it's another watch this space.
I think so. There are rumblings. We haven't really heard much about it for a little while. But yeah, if it comes to the forum, I think there is space for it. And I think, if you look at all those sort of companies, your Silver Lakes, Silver Lake have just done that massive deal with Endeavour, and you look at those sports businesses that are out there and the franchise sort of businesses that have been shown and what's happening in sport and sport investment, TGL and all those sort of things. Sport is a big market at the moment that people want to put money into. Yeah. So yeah, I think hopefully there's something that will work for rugby.
Okay, final question. Just end on a prediction for the Lions.
I mean, this is a fascinating question because if you'd have asked this in the autumn last year, it's a 3-0 whitewash, and it's an embarrassment and it's a smashing. But I'm so happy and congratulations to what Joe Smith has done. It wasn't the South African prop who's done it. It was a former Ireland coach. Congratulations on what Joe Smith's done with that team. I think even at the World Cup in 2023, they had a good group of players, but they just had no direction. They didn't really have an identity, and he's managed to do that. And they're going to get better. I'm intrigued to see how they go through the summer and then into the Rugby Championship. But I think the Lions still win it, but I think it's a lot closer than what people think. I think, will it be a 3-0? I don't think. I think it could be 2-1. It all comes out that first game. If we win that first game, we might do it. We might win all three, but it's going to be way closer than what everyone thinks.
Brilliant, Mike. Thanks so much,
Georgie. Always a pleasure. Take care.
Bye.